Good evening. Welcome to LPTV. We're doing an episode tonight on ballot access. You know, everybody's talking about the Democratic National Convention, how presidential candidates get on the ballot. And if you've been watching anything of the DNC, you know, it's just casual. Of course, it's assumed that they're going to have their presidential candidate and everybody's going to be able to vote for them. But that's not the way that democracy actually runs the United States, because it's not really fair. Ballot access is controlled by the government. It's controlled by the people in power. And the one thing that Republicans and Democrats have always agreed upon is they don't want to see libertarians running for office. And so as a result, every year we have to fight for ballot access. I want to give you a quick update of where the Libertarian Party is for our ballot access. So let me pop up the map of where we are. And you can look at this at any point in time and see lp.org/ballot access. That's the ballot dash access, or ballot access will work. And that's our current map. However, there are some updates that I want to give you to that. Right now, you'll see Maryland in orange. Our signature gathering is complete, and I believe that we've just been certified. Pennsylvania has been certified. New Hampshire is going through the final stages of the process. However, there's some updates around that I want to give you. This afternoon, I found out that New Hampshire is going to have, they're going to be very close. New Hampshire has 2 congressional districts, and they have a geographical requirement that requires them to gather half their signatures in CD1, which includes Manchester, the big city, and half their signatures in CD2, which is the rural area of New Hampshire. Some of you are saying New Hampshire's all rural. Well, no, Manchester's a city. But the tally as it's coming in is showing that CD2 is going to be very, very close indeed. And some of you have done ballot access in other states are saying, how can that be? Don't we have the ability to know how many valid signatures we have? Because we can look at the voter list. Unfortunately, that's not true in New Hampshire. Because in New Hampshire, the Secretary of State refuses to give the voter list to the Libertarian Party. Republicans and Democrats get it for free. For Libertarian Party in New Hampshire, it's $8,000 to get a copy of the voter list. So you actually can't validate the signatures before you turn them in. And that, of course, is a tremendous disadvantage, because in a lot of states, you have an idea of how well you're doing when you're gathering signatures, because at the end of the day, somebody looks at the signatures you've gathered, you compare it to the voter list, and you see whether or not you're in. Or some states have an even better system. And my home state of Maryland has an amazing system. Let me bring in the director of legislative affairs from Maryland, Eric Blitz. Eric,
Hello.
Thanks so much for joining us on LPTV. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about electronic petitioning in Maryland and how it works.
Sure. So in April, due to the pandemic, we asked the Board of Election for administrative relief. And at the time, we were asking to have our required signatures of 10,000 be reduced to 2,000. And they couldn't give us that, but what they did do was authorize electronic signatures. Now, due to prior litigation, we had in Maryland the ability to self-circulate. So when you go out and do petitioning, if you've done it before, you're the circulator under Maryland law. And so what you do is sign the affidavit at the end that says you've collected these signatures. So we had that system prior to this ruling. It didn't work that well, because what somebody has to do is fill out all of their information and then mail it in. So it's having a web form, but that's about it. What electronic signatures allowed us to do was to take the database from the Board of Elections, put it onto a website system that we worked with Andy Ellis of the Green Party in Maryland and Mr. McGuire, a volunteer who did all the coding. And what we did was you send through advertising, Facebook advertising, things like that, send the petitioner to that website. They fill out the form, and that form is checked automatically against the very registration data that the Board of Elections is going to check the petition for.
So I pulled up the form here on the right-hand side, so people ought to be able to see. So it has an email address, first name, last name, date of birth, phone number, and then you actually put in your house number, your building number, and then your zip code. And just based on that, the program is able to validate and say, okay, if I put in the right information, it would say, you're Dan Fishman. You're the Dan Fishman who's on the voter file.
Exactly. We're asking for only a portion of the information that's actually required under Maryland law for a petition. But that way we can take that partial information, like just the street address, and it provides both a fraud check so that people can't use this system to fraudulently sign petitions, pulls the data from the thing, and only presents it to the voter after this screen that you're showing if all the data matches. And then it's going to ask, after this screen, it would ask you to sign, and it tells you exactly how to sign your name. And that, for me, it would be Eric J. Blitz. Okay, so that is expressed to them by pulling the signature requirement from the Board of Elections database. So that, most of our invalidity comes from two things: an improper residential address put on a petition, or improper signatures. Well, this cures both of those, because now pretty much 100% of the signatures that are submitted this way are going to be valid.
Exactly. So I turned the screen off for a second so that people actually know the screen also shows my date of birth. But let's see if I can put something over this real quick. Sorry, and then I can share it up. So this is what it looks like after I filled through my information, and then underneath this window is more information about me that it validates my date of birth and stuff like that. And so I say that this is correct. I click on yes, and here we go. And so now I go through this thing, I put in my signature. And these are for the fields that it has to go into. And I'm done. It filled in my county. It filled in all the other information. Essentially, I'm signing, and that put me on the thing. And so I can view it right now. And so here it is. You can see this is my new party petitioner. It has my date of birth on there. Scroll that off real quick. But fills in my street address correctly, all that stuff, does the signature, everything like that. And so all the hard work. And one of the other things about that is that there's a geographical requirement on these sheets as well, right, Eric?
Correct. Each sheet has to be divided by county. You can't mix counties. So somebody from Carroll County or Baltimore County can't sign the same form. So it divides it up all into petition sheets that are one signature long. The reason you had to sign twice was you're signing once as the signer of the petition and once as a circulator, because you're self-certifying your own petition.
Right.
As long as they're over 18, they can do that under Maryland law. And so now our database has what you're showing, that filled out petition form.
Right.
And we can print it out as a PDF, print it out in paper form, and deliver it to the Board of Elections along with all the others. We just have to organize. Bob Johnston had to do all the hard work of dividing them up into various counties and organizing that. And so it was a very successful program.
It was very successful. And so I happened to be involved a little bit on the other end of it. At the end, I downloaded all the PDFs, printed them out, and LP National, also LP Maryland did a great job of promoting this in putting it out on their Facebook page. And then LP National ran some ads as well from our ad account throughout Maryland. And we generated, I believe, over 1,000 signatures through this. And the nice thing about them is that these are, they must have been close to 99% valid, because you can't sign it unless you're actually the right person. 1,500. So Bob Johnson just said 1,500 signatures. And so that being said, Eric, anything else you want to tell us about this program? This was, you guys did this in partnership with the Greens, right?
We did it in partnership with the Greens, and there were a few other organizations that were doing charter referendums that got added into the mix. At the end of that process for the user, they get sent to a splash page of your choice. In the middle of the process, we set up a separate data file for the Jorgensen campaign to use so that they could send it out to their people. And at the end of the process, the person would be delivered to the volunteer page of the Jorgensen website. So what we're doing next is working with Delegate Ruth out of Baltimore County to introduce legislation that would be delivered in January to make electronic signature gathering a permanent fixture under Maryland law.
Wow. So that's really exciting. Let's not gloss over that because we sort of have proven that it can work. And correct me if I'm wrong, Maryland already allows online voter registration, right? I can just go to a website. So clearly they believe that they can establish who you are well enough to allow you to register to vote. So you're essentially making the argument, if they can do that, then we ought to be able to sign petitions online as well.
Yes. Now the Board of Elections officials would prefer the system that we just did in this emergency context, where we're handling the database. They apparently are not terribly interested in taking over the data operations, probably because they're dealing with very old computers.
Right. But that's fine. We're happy to do the data work. Give us the stuff. Eric, thank you very much for being on LPTV and talking about what. So for me, I've done a lot of petitioning. I have, like I say, I've been around the block more times than the ice cream truck. This is the best system I've seen. It is the best system I've seen because it matches people up with a voter list, 100% validity for everybody who signs electronically, easy to print out. The only downside of it is that you're printing one name per sheet, so there's a lot of paper, but maybe that will convince the state to, at some day, say, okay, we're going to take them all in electronically, and then you guys don't even have to bring us paper. We can just count them. But that's the pipe dream. All right. Thank you very much. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
Absolutely. Well, I just wanted to add that, we also spent about $2,000 in Facebook advertising to collect those signatures as well. And, the Jorgensen, as you said, Jorgensen campaign put out some information. National did some advertising. I think that had a very nice cumulative impact with a lot of other social media posts. People were seeing the request multiple times in different spaces. And I think that leads to great results.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate it. I appreciate you being with us on LPTV. And so now I want to bring in a couple of the Libertarian Party full-time ballot access fighters. So Bob Johnston, who is currently the chair of Maryland, Ken Molman, who is the vice chair of the party, and Chris Thrasher, who, aside from being ballot access person extraordinaire, last month was the first activist of the month for the Libertarian Party. And as I recall, there's a cash reward with that. Is that right, Chris?
I have yet to receive said reward, but I will tell you this. I sincerely appreciate it. It was very much unexpected, and I have to thank Chairman Bishop Henchman for that. And I just want to say I think it's a really great program to start highlighting all the great activists that we have across the country. And I was very humbled and honored to receive that first award, and I can't wait to see who gets it next month.
Well, the interesting thing about it is that, all right, if the cash award ends up being zero, I think next month we should double it.
There you go. There you go.
All right. So I know you guys all have different times for different overviews for the ballot access thing. I'm going to go to Bob first, and I know my information is a little bit out of date. So Bob, what am I missing? What is on this map over here that is not accurate anymore?
We are now on 44 states plus DC. We are on in Alabama, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, I believe Wisconsin. Joe Bishop Henchman told me this afternoon that we were on. We will find out tomorrow by 5 o'clock about Maryland. Iowa has a challenge period that ends next Thursday. Virginia's turn-in is tomorrow, and that just leaves Rhode Island, which is September the 4th, I believe.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that is an impressive thing. And so if I could go back to Chris and talk about, you're the guy who's been in the field the most. Talk about how COVID has changed things, how different it was getting signatures in 2020 as opposed to 2016.
So the word is unprecedented. There's no way to describe it other than we've never had to deal with this before. People obviously aren't particularly interested in some random stranger coming up and handing them a clipboard in this day and age. So it's definitely changed the game. But even more so, it's the lack of events. For example, so I just spent some time in Maine working with the Libertarian Party in Maine to make sure that ballot drive went through successfully. And so traditionally, a Maine petition, which, by the way, we wouldn't even have to do if it wasn't for the court tossing, the Secretary of State getting rid of 5,000 registered libertarians completely unconstitutionally and unfairly. But anyway, so because that happened, we had to do a petition in Maine. And traditionally in Maine, there is a primary election that happens in August, and solicitors can stand or even sit at the table inside a polling place and usually knock out the bulk of a petition right then and there on one day. Of course, that was not the case this year. They made everyone stand outside.
Wow.
Of course, wouldn't you know it, it rained. And I mean, it was a monsoon. Okay, we're not talking little sprinkles. We are talking drenched petition sheets, ruined.
I believe it in Maine, they say it's a nor'easter.
It definitely had that type of effect. Yeah. So the entire morning's petitioning was washed out, and we were lucky to have some really good activists in the field to collect. I actually want to give a shout out to guys who came up from New Hampshire, Richard Manzo, Justin O'Donnell. They stood out in the polling places. Jim Baines, and all the guys at the also Chris Lyons. Lots of shout outs to make for the Libertarian Party of Maine. Sean Lavasser. I know I'm going to miss people. There were a lot of people that came out to make sure that got done. But it's been a nightmare this year. And let's not also forget Maine in the summer. Maine, lovely place to be in the summer. And usually there is a festival of some variety at every moment across the state. Nothing this year. So right. Our ability to interact with voters at public gatherings was nothing. And I know this is being dealt with across the country. And this shows the trouble that we've had in such states where you still have to do the in-person petitioning, the ridiculous court ruling out of Pennsylvania where the governor had the entire state shut down, yet the court said, oh, it has absolutely no effect on your ability to petition. Well, I don't know who came up with that. And you juxtapose that with what they're doing in Maryland, where they've been able to use technology to get online signatures. There's no reason to continue these archaic rules that just they do nothing but limit your choice. There's so many technological options that we could be using these days.
And it's interesting that you say that we have all these places where the state has really fought against us. But we've won a lot of those. And so that leads me to the next guest that I want to bring in, which is the chair of the Libertarian Party of New Mexico, Chris Lucchini. So, Chris, thanks so much for joining us here on LPTV. You have got a story to tell. You want to just go from the beginning?
Yeah. So in New Mexico, we've been a major party for quite a while due to Johnson running and getting more than 5% in a statewide election. So that's the requirement.
That's when he ran for senator.
And for president. And yes, we're going to have another lawsuit here shortly because of the wording is we believe that the length of major party status should be equal to the length of term of the office run for.
All right.
Secretary of State disagrees. So we'll see her in court and she could lose again. That would make her 0 for 4. But,
so I think the again is foreshadowing. So tell us about the beginning of the story.
All right. So major party status is what we need. This is a contentious year. We have a hero of a gentleman who's 86 years old, I believe, who is running for U.S. Senate. The U.S. Senate seat is vacant and is being hotly contested by an unexpectedly strong Republican who used to be the TV weatherman, so he's got face and name recognition. So we really wanted someone else on a down ballot race that was statewide. And we found an attorney, Stephen P. Curtis. He ran for U.S. Congress in 1984, I believe. Good libertarian, and he agreed to run. And so, unfortunately, it was like 2 days to the deadline, and we couldn't collect the necessary 230 signatures in that time period. So we ended up running him as a write-in candidate with a ton of door knocking to let people know early on that he needed 230 votes in the primary instead of 230 signatures. That's the requirement. If you're write-in, an uncontested write-in, you need 200.
Just to be clear, this is a gentleman who is in his 80s.
No,
going out.
Bob Walsh is the senator. He's 86. Steve P. Curtis, our attorney, is 50 something.
Gotcha.
And an active attorney. Two different people.
Right.
U.S. Senate race, and then appeals court position 2 race. One's a state position, one's a federal. So we wanted 2 positions. We have the second one. We door knocked. We basically used petitioning as a way to get into people's face and let them know that they needed to vote for Stephen Curtis, because if you are in an uncontested write-in race in the primary, you need as many votes as you would have needed signatures. So he needed to, even though he's uncontested, he needed 230 votes in the primary. So we have our primary. We have roughly 1,600 libertarian ballots that were turned in. The presidential, the sum of all the presidential candidates got something like 1,570 votes. And the early unofficial results showed Curtis at 170 some odd votes. And we're like, okay, it's going to get, it would tick up a little bit. And so the process in New Mexico is that there are county canvassing boards that meet to certify the official results for each county. And then after all the counties are reported, 1 week later, there's a state canvassing board. So my local county canvassing board met and dutifully reported 4 votes for Stephen Curtis, which caused, well, you probably could have heard the scream from Albuquerque. Myself, my wife, my daughter, and 2 of my other candidates in the county all voted and wrote in Stephen Curtis's name, and several of them took pictures of their ballot and posted it on Facebook. I'm like, wow. So I called up my county clerk and I said, this is baloney. This is not possible. I know there's at least 5 votes, and I'm just violently shocked there aren't more. And lo and behold, between the time, keep in mind this is an official certified number that the county is issuing, between when the county certified in Los Alamos and when the county results were reported at the state canvassing boards, it went from 4 votes to 18 votes.
Fascinating. And already that's troubling, because essentially, if you hadn't said anything, they probably wouldn't have changed it at all.
Correct. Right. And the hardest thing, and by the way, we did a mailing. We sent out 5,000 postcards essentially to registered libertarians, reminding them to vote for Curtis. Right. So and that's a little less than half of the total. We think the Secretary of State reports 12,000 registered libertarians in New Mexico. So anyway, so we got the word out, roughly half of them. The ones that were most active that had voted previously in major party elections and so forth. All right, so that's an interesting discrepancy, 450% increase. The part that's very interesting is we did also have a report of the number of people who filled the little bubble in on the Scantron sheet. You have to fill the bubble in, and then you have to write the name in. And so in Los Alamos, the yield was 90%. We had 20 bubbles. We had 18 votes. We go to
right. Keep going.
Okay, so I'm going to get in the weeds here. So it gets interesting how we figure all this stuff out.
This is the ballot access election nerd show. There's going to be some weeds.
Okay, there's some weeds here. If you need to get out the weed whacker, let me know.
Yeah,
I can pull it back. Okay, so at this point, immediately after this, the state canvassing board reports 204 votes for Curtis. We are now 26 votes short.
Wow.
We had done a recount in 2018 when Bob Walsh, now got the guy who's now running for Senate, ran for governor, and we picked up about 8% during that recount. And so we made a decision immediately that we're going to ask for a recount.
Now, did you have to pay for this at all? Is there a financial thing?
Yeah, we're going to get there. It's fun. It's really fun. Okay, so the Wednesday after the Tuesday of the state canvassing board, we send an email and make a phone call to the Secretary of State. What's the process to do this? The candidate sent one. I, as the state chair, sent one. The campaign manager sent one. Nothing. Radio silence. A couple days later, we need some answers on this. What is the process for this? It's not completely clear. In 2018, and this is a subject that we're going to get into with some essentially Freedom of Information Act requests. The recount that was ordered by the Secretary of State was for all precincts in 8 counties. There's 1,900 and some odd precincts in New Mexico. And so those 8 counties would have amounted to something a little over 1,200 precincts, something like that. So we hear nothing from the Secretary of State. We have 6 days under state law to do a recount. Monday is the deadline.
And just to be clear, the Secretary of State is a partisan officer.
It is a partisan office in New Mexico, and she is a Democrat, and I've been told is the former head of the Green Party.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, it gets very interesting. So on the 6th day at 1:40 p.m., they finally respond, and they tell us that, contrary to our belief, that it is so you have to put down a bond to ask for a recount. Otherwise, everybody asks for a recount all the time. Okay.
Right.
The bond under state law is set by the state canvassing board in every major election in March. They didn't do it. They held an emergency 6-minute meeting. They reaffirmed the old number of $3,400 for each precinct board.
Wait, for each precinct, $3,400?
Yes.
Holy!
Yes.
And you said there's over 1,000 precincts?
Over 1,900 precincts in the state.
All right, so I can do that math real fast.
Yeah,
2,000 times 34.
Yeah, it's
70,000. 68,000.
No, $6.8 million.
Oh, see, I need to take my shoes off to do math that high.
Yes. Well, sorry. So yeah, 6.8 million. Now, luckily, they were helpful and pointed out that there were only Libertarian ballots in slightly over 1,000 precincts in the state. So we only have to deliver 3.8 million, and if we want to recount Bernalillo County, it's 3.4 million-ish, something like that. Bernalillo County being our largest county where the majority of the votes came from. And so we had asked them previously, how do we pay you? You know, if it says cash or bond or a bond, basically.
Pennies.
And, so due to some fantastic help from the former chair of the party, located a donor who was willing to put up a large chunk of change. We noted that the 2018 recount couldn't possibly put up $4 million. So we came to the conclusion that the interpretation was 1 precinct board per county. So we put up 7 counties worth of money, $25,000 or so, had that ready to go, and asked them for wiring instructions, which they delivered at 4:54 p.m., telling us that we had to get the money there by 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's not like just casual evil. It's evil.
Oh, it gets better.
All right, good.
It really does. So we actually do get the money wired. The wire was initiated, and we have the timestamp on that. One of their people calls me and the next day and says, "We acknowledge you started the wire, within the time window, so we're going to accept it. We don't believe." Oh, by the way, okay, so this thing that happened in Los Alamos County. I'm going to back up here a little bit. I had figured out that, there was this massive change in the vote total. Got a hold of the county clerk, who is a very capable and nonpartisan public official. She actually does her job. And one of her staff explained to me that what happened was they had this new 2016 era high-speed tabulating machine that is used only for absentee ballots. Okay, it's not used ever for anything else. And the process is that any ballot that has the bubble filled in is kicked out, and obviously a human being has to look at the name that's written in to make sure it's not Daffy Duck, right?
Right.
So what happens is the judges, the election judges, basically look at the name that's written in. Does it match? Does voter intent show that they wanted to vote for Curtis? And then they tabulate that literally on a piece of paper. All right. So the problem was, apparently, on the old machine, the pre-2016 machine, you did a particular process to take those hand-tabulated votes and put them into the system, into the machine. The new machine, you could do that, and you would think that you had reported those votes, but it didn't happen. So what was happening is they'd actually counted the vote. They just had a failure in data transmission. All right. So I found that out, basically right around the time that we had this issue with the state canvassing board. I subsequently got a hold of somebody in the another county and said, I need to look at the detail where these votes came from. Bernalillo County, largest, several million people, half of all the registered libertarians in the state, 38 votes written in for Curtis. Let me see where they're coming from. Early voting, in-person voting, or absentee. 37 votes come from in-person voting. 1 vote from a hand-tabulated absentee ballot, and that's typically because they're torn up in the mail and they won't go through the high-speed machine. 0 out of 170 bubbles filled in recorded votes for our candidate. Wow. 0 out of 170. Is that a little suspicious to you?
It is.
A little.
I mean, because even if you were going to get, 1%, you'd expect 1.
Yeah. Well, so another thing that Josh Chappelle, who's a lawyer that helps us out, had done a bunch of data analysis, and the average yield for bubbles filled in to votes for Curtis throughout most of the state was 80 to 90%. Mm-hmm. Bernalillo County, it was 14%. Los Alamos County, it was 15%. Doña County, it was 40-something%. Well, this is really odd, especially odd when it's just absentee ballots. Oh, by the way, this is exactly the same thing the Los Alamos clerk had reported to me. So I had reported this to the Secretary of State, saying this is probably just a tabulation error. We won't need to do a formal recount if you'll just correctly do the data transmission. And it's in your power to, to say that this is a data transmission error, a canvassing error, rather than a voting error.
Right.
All right. So we get the money to them. We have a phone conversation with them. They're being somewhat accommodating on the Tuesday after we deposit, or the Tuesday that we got the money deposited. End of the week, we get a letter saying, screw you. You didn't get it in time. You didn't properly apply for a recount. You didn't give us adequate money. Buzz off.
Wow.
So at this point, we got a hold of Chris Wiest, and he basically volunteers to do
Chris
a lawsuit.
Lucchini, who I should point out, is the chair of the Libertarian Party of Kentucky,
yes,
as well as an attorney who has done a lot of ballot access work.
And he's a great guy.
Yep.
Have him on speed dial when you have a problem. So, all right. So we get a hold of him. We work through the stuff. We decide basically that the New Mexico recount statute is grotesquely unfair. Keeping in mind this $3,400 per precinct is an estimate, right? It says explicitly in the law that it's an estimate. If they had applied that amount to a recount of the entire state, it would have worked out to $4,400 per ballot. Now, even the government would have a hard time spending $4,400 per ballot. And in Bernalillo County, the $3 million works out to be almost $5,000. So right. Anyway, thousands of dollars per ballot, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, so, well, that's clearly bullshit, right?
Yep.
And we had asked them as part of this process, give us a more reasonable number. We make up 0.5% of the primary ballots. We'll go for 0.5% of what the deposit is. No, they won't play that game. So we filed the lawsuit. They were dragging their feet, I think deliberately, trying to time us out. I believe, and I don't have any direct evidence for this, but I believe they knew they had screwed up. They knew that there was a problem. So we have a hearing in front of the judge. And the judge is not really buying their arguments. Well, this is illegitimate. We should just obey state law, and they should just go away and die. He's like, no, they have a reasonable chance of winning on the merits, and this is grotesquely unfair. I believe the word was fundamentally unfair.
Wow.
And so they make various attestations about. They called I believe they had the Los Alamos County clerk on. They had other county clerks on who swore there's nothing wrong with their count. They found it not at all curious that not a single absentee ballot that was machine counted yielded a vote for the candidate. So at that point, at, I don't remember, 7 o'clock at night, it was relatively late, I get a call from Wiest and saying, okay, we've got to pick 3 counties because the judge is going to allow us to subpoena the ballots from the 3 counties. And it was like, well, obviously Bernalillo and Doniana. Yep. 2 big population centers, and what the heck, Sandoval. And that was just simply based on population. They, of course, attempt to quash the subpoenas. A week later, we have a hearing on quashing the subpoenas. The judge issues a 173-page opinion as part of that process, saying, yes, indeed, you do have to actually deliver images of the ballots. And about, I think it was actually before that hearing, Doniana County Clerk stipulated that they had undercounted by 16 ballots. Okay, so roughly speaking, that was a 47% increase in the number of votes from Doniana County, and that amounts to 16 of the 26 we need. So now all we need is 10 votes from Bernalillo County and Sandoval. Much later, I believe, and I think I got the information the next day, we actually get the ballot images. It is exactly what we expect. The vast majority of the absentee ballots that had the bubble filled in had votes. We went from 38 votes in Bernalillo County to 183 votes, a 480% increase.
Wow.
145 extra votes. Sandoval County yielded 1. And so all told, we picked up 162 votes when we needed 26.
Wow.
Keeping in mind, we only recounted 3 counties.
Right. And this is the on the absentee ballots where all of them were 0.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about, say, the percentage increased, but on the absentee ballots, it was an infinite increase.
Correct.
Because you went from 0
not
to
counting.
A positive number.
Right.
Exactly.
It's actually really cool if you can just not count your political opponent's ballots. Didn't Chairman Mao say something about that?
Yeah, it's not who counts, it's who counts the votes.
Yes. And so what happened at that point is all the clerks at this point had admitted that there was an issue. Sandoval, I don't actually know where the vote in Sandoval came from because it was 1 vote. Yep. So that's so we go forward, and we're supposed to have a meeting hearing on Monday where I was going to testify, and another voter whose vote didn't count was going to testify as well as a candidate. And the Secretary of State basically on Sunday came back and said, okay, we're going to just cave. We're going to concede, and agreed to pay costs and attorney's fees, which is not something apparently that they normally do. And so that's essentially what happened. The judge signed a 4-page order where the Secretary of State pinky swore that she will address this issue and it won't happen again. I believe this issue started with these machines in 2016. And the only reason it hadn't been caught was in a normal election, there's relatively few absentee ballots.
Wow.
And it only affects essentially write-ins. Now, there was a Democratic candidate that I believe was kept off the ballot because of the same error, but they chose not to join our lawsuit. So that's
That's an astonishing story. I want to kind of open it up here for comments, and I'm going to bring in the vice chair of the party, Ken Mollman, who, Ken, you were also on the ballot access committee, I believe, in 2016.
Yes.
Is this among the craziest stories you've ever heard?
It's interesting because every state has different rules and different laws. And so we hear lots of crazy stories, and they're always a different story. Whether that's, Tennessee, you want to be on the ballot as a libertarian? Well, you have to go collect 57,000 signatures, which is insane. There's the stray mark rule. I think that's in Massachusetts, if I remember right, where if somebody decides to be a jerk and just put a stray mark on your petition, it invalidates every signature you've already collected on that sheet, which is obviously stupid.
Let's go back to that Tennessee thing. So it's 57,000 signatures if you want to be a libertarian.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to be an independent,
275.
Because those numbers are so close to each other.
Yeah.
That makes complete sense.
Yeah. And what's crazy, and I live here in Kentucky, and without ballot access, it is 5,000 signatures for a statewide race, all the way down to, I think the lowest is 20 or 25 for a local county race. If you're not a Democrat or Republican, they don't discriminate against any other party. It's just if you're a Democrat or Republican, you get one set of rules, which is 2 signatures and you're on, or everybody else. And we've been lucky since the 2016 election. We've lived under those rules of only 2 signatures. We still don't get a primary in Kentucky, which, that's all these different states have different rules. And so I've heard it all. The 2012, I remember Gary Johnson, they decided that he filed his paperwork to withdraw like an hour too late in Michigan or something dumb like that. So he wasn't on the ballot in Michigan in 2012 because we were an hour late getting the paperwork in.
That's happening right now, right? Who's familiar with Wisconsin? Kanye West was denied because they got in at 5 o'clock and 14 seconds.
Right.
Now, we have a couple of computer people on here. Let's talk about the accuracy of clocks just for a second. Maybe just for a second is a wrong thing.
Were they syncing their clocks with an atomic clock or not?
As it turns out, they were basing it off of a wristwatch, not even off of a cell phone. So yeah, it's completely arbitrary. And this is the thing that, in Chris's story, what you're talking about here with Gary Johnson in Michigan, is that there is, there's not any point in being a libertarian unless you.
Standard, Dan, it's a double standard.
I was going to say conspiracy.
Well, it
double
is.
Standard is good.
It's a double standard created through conspiracy. The Democrats and Republicans, who have dominated politics in America for the last 150 years or so, have written a set of rules that discriminate against everyone who's not them. Because if there's one thing Democrats and Republicans agree upon, it is that they don't want anybody else in the game. They don't want outside ideas. They don't want new people involved, because there is power in being number 2. You can gain money and influence just by being the opposition party. So they have an inherent goal or an inherent desire to keep it limited to number 1 and number 2. And, we are on track to hit 50 plus DC again this year. And that's huge. And the fact that we did it back to back, that 2016 and 2020, I'm trying to remember if there's been a party that has done it.
The Libertarians are the only party to have had 50 state ballot access in consecutive presidential elections. The Libertarians are the Republicans and the Democrats. Ross Perot did not do it. Ross Perot with a gazillion dollars was not able to do it.
Right. No, and it's a testament to our organization, because at the end of the day, it is an immensely difficult task to pull this off.
Right.
It is,
and in fact, I've got to throw into the fact that the Greens, right, who we would consider the 4th party, the Greens have never had 50 state ballot access in their entire history, which is just astonishing.
Yeah, and especially considering, the Greens, I guess, are kind of at least loosely affiliated with the Greens worldwide. They've got the Europeans and the Australians and all those
Right.
folks that are all Greens, I assume they're all related. They seem to have a similar philosophy. I have no idea how their party works internally.
Right.
But, you know, they are certainly, you know, they're there. It's not like they're not there.
Yep.
It's not like their philosophy is illegitimate. I think it's wrong, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a place to be on the ballot, just like we do.
Right. So Bob Johnson, jump in here with a couple of those examples that you were talking about. I think you're muted, Bob.
He is.
46 state ballots.
So Ralph Nader never did better than 46 state ballots. And then what was it you were saying about in 1988, Buchanan?
It was Pat Buchanan and Lenore Falana, and I cannot remember the name of the party. They did get on all 50 ballots.
But they didn't repeat.
NDC.
So, I mean, other people have been on. So Ross Perot was
Correct.
on all 50 states when he ran with the Reform Party. I'm not sure, but I actually believe the Dixiecrats were on in all 50 states as well. I'm not sure about that. I know they're the highest third party total of electoral votes. That's, for those of you who are true election nerds, that's a fascinating story, is look at the electoral map from 1968 and see how crazy it was. A third party got, I'm trying to remember, I think 70 electoral votes. Yeah.
The Southeast.
Yep.
Yeah.
In fact, if Nixon doesn't win by such a huge margin, there's a big constitutional, well, it's not a constitutional crisis. The Constitution is pretty clear about what's supposed to happen. But so one of the things that we talk about, and Ken, you were alluding on this, that we have this breadth of knowledge that's required to run. And it has to be handled at an institutional level.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that I think, just incredibly unfair. All this stuff that, Chris, you were talking about beforehand. Did you know any of these rules, Chris, before you got involved in what was going to happen?
I knew some of them. So here's a little interesting quirk. So remember how I said you need as many votes in the primary as you need signatures to get on the ballot under the normal process. It's only for uncontested races. If there had been two people, there could have been one vote.
Wow.
Whoever gets the most gets on the ballot.
But that can't be for two write-in candidates.
Correct. If you have two write-in candidates, whoever gets the most votes wins.
So, Chris, wouldn't that make sense then from now on to just intentionally run a lame duck and just be like, yep, we ran another one?
Yeah, and you know what? Here's the problem. This is for appellate court. You have to be admitted to the bar and prove that you have, and swear under perjury that you've practiced law in the state of New Mexico for 10 years.
Admitted to the bar or have drunk in a bar? Because I can do the latter one.
The second one, yeah, even I can do that, right? So we found by, again, tremendous amount of effort. We took all 11,000 members of the state bar and stalked them to find out if they were registered libertarians. The vast majority of them are not registered as any party, which for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So we ended up finding basically 4 people, and they declined to run because it would adversely affect their ability to practice law. So, you're running in a state that has exactly 2 judges that are not Democrats.
Wow.
And so you need to be aware of the risks of challenging this system.
Sure.
So anyway, yeah.
Go ahead. I was just going to say. So you essentially knew some of this, but there's a whole body of knowledge that you sort of had to acquire. That is thing, and these laws are created. And so let me go to law student Chris Thrasher to give us something. These laws were actually created specifically to suppress votes. Is that right, Chris?
That's correct. Yeah. The process of getting on the ballot was never up until the 30s was a pretty organic process. You run, you state your intention to run, you end up getting on the ballot. And these laws actually came from Georgia, which was seeking to eliminate the ability of the Communist Party and of a organization of African Americans who were trying to start a party in the 1930s. Actually, it might have been. Forgive me. It might have been a little earlier than the 30s. But yeah, these laws have no reason to exist except to stifle and eliminate competition. And I always point to one particular example when everybody says, "Oh, well, we're going to have so many people confused if there's too many candidates on the ballot." I always go to the 2003 California governor's race. It was a recall election. There were 135 candidates on that ballot, and 48.6% of those voters still managed to vote for Arnold Schwarzenegger. And the person who finished in second, Cruz Bustamante, he had 31%.
That's the Gray Davis recall?
The idea that yes, that's correct. And so this idea that, the ballot's too crowded, voters aren't smart enough to find their candidate. Absolutely.
And on top of that, Chris, LP Ohio, there were no ballot access laws in Ohio for almost a decade. And, oh no, the sky is going to fall. There'll be hundreds of candidates in every race. And, that just didn't hold true. I think presidential, there were 10 or 12 at the most. And then you go down ballot, and really it was mostly, you had some Greens, of course, but it was almost entirely Libertarians that were going all the way down the ballot, down to state house races and that sort, that it is the Libertarian Party seeking to make change at every level. But most organizations don't, either they're not large enough, not strong enough, can't find enough people. Even when it was completely open access in Ohio, where literally all you had to do was walk in with some paperwork and a small, relatively small filing fee, the ballots weren't crowded. This idea that ballot crowding is a disaster waiting to happen if these ballot access laws don't exist is untrue. And even in the scenario, as you point out, Chris, correctly, even in the scenario where there's 135 people on that ballot, and it was done intentionally, by the way, there were people trying to jack the ballot up to try to favor certain people. People still were able to find Arnold Schwarzenegger, even though he was randomly placed on the ballot in various places. It wasn't like he was always at the top. He was all over the place on the ballot. People still found him because that's who they wanted to vote for. And
my name sticks out because it is so long.
Yes.
Sorry, I couldn't resist that.
It reminds me of a comedy skit. But anyway, the point is that these laws are all bogus, and they've been found constitutional by SCOTUS to avoid. One part is avoiding ballot crowding, right? And we already have definitive proof that doesn't matter and usually doesn't happen. And then the other is the whole modicum of support thing. And this goes back to what Eric was talking about with Maryland. And why don't we have a better process to collect signatures? Why do we have to go out and use dead trees and people standing in the rain to get these signatures? It's absolutely idiotic. When we have technology, I think it was the 90s when Clinton was president. So yeah, it was the 90s when they passed the law that said an electronic signature was as good as a real wet signature.
Right.
For legal purposes, for health care purposes, you can sign online. Why can't I sign a petition online anywhere? It makes no sense. And if the idea is for a modicum of support, does it matter if it's on a piece of dead tree or electronic? No, it does not. And so what this really is, these ballot access laws are nothing more than intentional vote anchors to keep people off the ballot. The D's and the R's in states that set these laws know exactly that's what it is and know exactly what they're doing. And when
I think
it's quote unquote too easy or somebody starts getting momentum, then they'll jack the percentages up. And we've seen that too.
And you did say the O word. So who wants to tell the John Kasich, Ohio story?
Which one?
How they kept Gary Johnson off the ballot. I'll go for anyone. Bob, do you want to tell? Do you know that story?
I was asking
Ken probably knows it more than I do since he lives right next door.
Yeah, Senate Bill 193 so basically what ended up happening was in 2008, the Libertarian Party of Ohio won a lawsuit saying that Ohio's ballot access scheme was unconstitutional. And the courts, because they can't legislate, the only thing they can do is strike laws down, right? So they struck the law down. Now there's no law on the books for third parties and independents to get on the ballot. The D's and the R's are like, haha, you screwed yourself. Now you can't even get on the ballot at all. So we sued again, and of course we won that because you can't just be like, nope, nobody else but these or ours are allowed on the ballot. That's not obviously on its face unconstitutional. And they said, hey, until there's a new law, it's a free-for-all. Anybody can get on. And so the Libertarian Party acted as a major party, just like Democrats and Republicans, holding their they have a multi-tier system there with Central Committee and Executive Committee. Central committees are elected at state-run primaries. They use the state-run primary to elect their Central Committee for years. It was fine. And then Senate Bill 193 came down the pipeline in 2014, and it was passed as an emergency because, oh no, too many people might get on the ballot because history showed that wasn't a problem, but all of a sudden it's an emergency. It passes as an emergency. They get the emergency part called off by courts as well. Simultaneously to all that happening, they pull some shenanigans to get our gubernatorial candidate, which is the ballot access retention race besides president in Ohio. They got our gubernatorial candidate kicked off the ballot.
Charlie Earl.
Out of the primary, which we were still entitled to then, which was our mechanism to get on. And so we basically had no way to retain access in 14, on top of having to get a much higher percentage to get for signatures to get on the ballot. And that drive in 2017 to 2018 took approximately 18 months, cost over $200,000, and we got LP Ohio back on the ballot. It was insane. But and that's one state. I mean, you're talking about, and that's not even counting all the volunteer time. If you throw all the value of the volunteer time in, you're probably close to $400,000, and it's just ridiculous. I mean,
and that's the fascinating thing about it. And I want to talk about this as we're wrapping up, is this idea of pay to play, that in order to fight for your rights, which, voting is, I would argue, voting is First Amendment. That is political speech. In order to get that right, you have to have enough money to fight the state in court. And I'm going to just go around the circle and talk about this briefly. Chris, overall, how much money did it take for the Libertarian Party of New Mexico to get justice?
I'm not going to include the attorney's fees that the Secretary of State's going to pay. Roughly around $7,000. We recovered some of that. Some of that was the mailings. We recovered some of that from the candidates and so forth. We did a fundraising drive. You can go to lpnm.us/donate to help us out. So we're still in the hole, roughly $5,000. I expect the state to refund us some of those, probably about $500 or so. But we could absolutely use it. We put the money into this race because it's a ballot access race. For all you other candidates who are wondering why we're not spending that kind of money on you, because we don't have it. And just so you know, one of the issues here, so you talked about the numbers. Our numbers are right now, as a major party, we need 17 signatures to get on the ballot. As a state senator, 10 for most districts as a state house, and 230 for statewide races. Without that, statewide is about 6,000. Typical House of Representative race would be 400 or 500. Not U.S. House, but State House. It becomes extremely daunting. One additional thing on the petition signatures, we have our Secretary of State believes the database is secure enough that you can change your voter registration online with just your driver's license or state ID number, but refuses to allow it for petition signing. There are so few libertarians, we offer to print out each individual libertarian on their own sheet of paper and go knock on their door for a signature, having the name and the address legible, and all they have to do is sign. And there's nothing in the law that says you can't do it. She says, no, we'll invalidate your signatures.
Which is just insane. And one of the problems, of course, is we're fighting against Secretary of States who are elected by the parties that they then protect with the ballot access laws.
Correct.
Now, of course, there's another way to spend money to get on the ballot. And a guy who's an expert at that, Chris, I'm going to come to you quickly. Can you talk about some of the crazy fees that you saw being charged for petitioning?
Oh my goodness. I mean, so Bloomberg was paying circulators like $15 per signature.
$15 for a raw signature.
But that's for the person who's actually on the ground. And let me tell you what, there's a lot of middlemen sometimes. So I mean, they were some law firms that specialize for the D's and the R's, even though they only have just a negligible amount compared to what we have. I mean, they'll pay 50 to 100 per signature. It's insane the amount of money that is wasted on these arcane and useless laws.
That is insane. So, Bob Johnson, let me come to you. Tell me a little bit about Mississippi and what ballot access is involved in Mississippi and how crazy that is.
It's probably the easiest state. It's very similar to what Ken was describing about Ohio. You just need to organize as a party, file certain documents, have a state committee, and that's it. The filing fees are very reasonable. I think it's $200 for statewide office, and that's it. And they regularly have no more than 3 or 4 candidates per race on the ballot.
And yet, Mississippi has not blown up. The computers that count the votes haven't crashed because of too many candidates. And so here we have, I mean, what does it say about the state of the union that Mississippi is leading the way in fair ballot access? And I don't mean that as a slight on you, Mississippi, but you guys know. We talk about you sometimes. That being said, Ken, you're the vice chair. I want to give you a chance to have the closing word, and then I'm going to send us out.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's no organization that has done 50 plus DC that has consistently performed as well as the LP when it comes to ballot access. Period. Full stop. We have the ability, we have the organization, we have the people, and thankfully we have the donors because it does cost money, even with our level of organization, even with our institutional knowledge and people on the ground. Listen, it's a full-time job, especially in some of these states. It's just expensive to get on the ballot, and it is worth it. We did the big statewide drive in 2015 in Oklahoma, and since that time, they have retained it. They've got actually better laws than they had when we got it, and we've made a positive improvement, and that's why we do this. We do it because in the long term, it is beneficial not just for our party, not just for our philosophy, but for the country, and we really do appreciate everyone who has contributed in some way to help us finish these drives. It is an immense task. And as someone who is on the other side, who is spending the money and getting it done, I am immensely thankful and always respectful of the funds, the precious funds that we do get to pull this off. So I just want to say thank you to all the people who did the work. Thank you to the volunteers. Thank you to the donors. Thank you to the state parties that helped. Thank you to all those folks that did the work and contributed what was necessary to get this done.
That's perfect. And thank you, Ken. You gave me the perfect segue. And that's Ken Molman, vice chair. My other guests were Chris Thrasher, Bob Johnson, chair of Libertarian Party Maryland, Chris Lucchini, chair of Libertarian Party in Mexico, and Eric Blitz, who is the legislative director in Maryland Libertarian Party. I want to give a shout out to some of the people we talked about. Chris Wiest being a lawyer doing some work for us. Oliver Hall, Mark Granis also have done some tremendous amounts of work. Eric, who was on earlier. It takes a village. We are in this together. This idea, we are people united. We are states united. It's in our name. We're not supposed to be a universal state. We're not supposed to be a unified state. We're supposed to be United States. And each one of our states, we're supposed to have equal access to the ballot. It's something that you can make a difference on. My name is Dan Fishman. I'm the executive director of the Libertarian Party. You have just finished watching LPTV. Thank you very much for attending. We look forward to seeing you Friday night tomorrow with Pat Ford's Candidate Corner at 8 p.m.